Okay, let's start. Good afternoon. My name is Jessica Arendt. I have a dual purpose in this industry. I own a company called Promessa LLC. I specialize in compliance for both cannabis and hemp, domestic and international. And I am Chief Compliance Officer for an organic brand called Cannabidiol Life, who I almost forgot. I am filling in as moderator for this panel. I obviously don't look like Carrie. Carrie couldn't make it, so my apologies. We are going to have to try to wing it on this panel, but this is a conversation that I am most familiar with. I've been in this industry since its inception, since the days of moms with kids named Charlotte Figge. These are the kids that had Dravet syndrome and seizures, neurological conditions. They were flocking to my home state of Colorado for access to the extracts to save their children's lives and provide quality of life. So I've been doing this for nearly 7 years now. Somebody reminded me on the last panel. And if you know anything about this industry, 7 years is like dog years in the hemp industry. I think I've aged to 12 times that. It has not been an easy industry. No industry in which you are making history is an easy industry. And we trip and fall, knock our teeth out, and reinsert them and try again the next day. That being said, one of the biggest hurdles that we have had in this industry wraps itself around the idea of banking and merchant processing. It has been an uphill grind. On average, your CBD company sees their merchant processor or banking institution kick them out of their system anywhere on an average of 6 to 8 months at a time. So there's a constant turnover of processing in this industry to move the money around because technically, well, it's been seen as taboo. There's very little wrapped around the SEC and very little wrapped around the money with regard to this while we plow towards historical moments of regulation. So without further ado, I'm going to ask each panelist to take 2 minutes, introduce themselves, give you an idea about where they started, why they're here, and where we're going. Gentlemen.
I'll start. Hello, Brian Lytle here. So I've been in the CBD industry for about 6-7 years. So in dog years or CBD years, that is a long time, relatively speaking. I started off in the wellness industry. So I had a personal training company. Prior to, I was introduced to CBD by a fellow colleague and said, this is supposed to be good for you. He didn't know much about it, but I did more research on it and I found out it was good for inflammation. So I had clients that I was working with. I started giving CBD to them and they used it for inflammation of the gut called leaky gut syndrome. And surprisingly, it worked. So from there, I'm like, there's got to be more to this. So I became evangelical about it. I started distributing different CBD products. Started off in Ohio, then went from the East Coast to the West Coast. From there, I learned that not all companies were what they said they were. I didn't even know when I started off what testing was. So I wanted to make a little bit of a change. So I started my own manufacturing company. So the first one was on the West Coast, then in Ohio, Cleveland, Ohio, specifically. From there, I started up some retail stores called Hemp Spot. Hemp Spot is a place where we sell CBD products and hemp food products and healthy snack alternatives, kind of like a store within a store. Think of Target within Starbucks within Target. There's a CBD store and hemp store within another store. One is Fit Market, which is also mine. And then also I do consulting for CBD brands that are trying to start off in the industry. So from the infancy, I had some challenging times when it comes to banking and credit card processing. I stopped counting after I was shut down over 5 times. I've had my money seized in my bank account. I wasn't able to access it for months on end. It's really hard when you're first starting off to be able to do this. So I don't recommend that for anyone. There's better ways to go about it. I just did not know about it at the time. And I've had my credit card processor shut down, countless times. So I have some really good resources now, and hopefully I'm able to share the insight with you so you don't have the same bad experiences that I did.
Thomas?
Hello, everybody. My name is Tom Howard. You can find me on the internet at cannabisindustrylawyer.com. You could join over 24,000 people that hit that site last month, and then I will also be getting a lot of phone calls. This one I think is actually from the event, which is great. And so then you can find us on Cannabis Legalization News on YouTube and then wherever podcasts are. So we got about 23,000 and change viewers on that. And we do podcasts live on the internet twice a week on Wednesdays and also on Sundays. And so they're really good if you care about cannabis legalization news. We also discuss hemp. It's the whole plant. CBD and or hemp businesses. Oh, I am a lawyer. And so I've been a lawyer for many years, but now I'm more of an internet-based lawyer, and which is great because then right now I'm getting more calls than I know what to do with out of New York and New Jersey, as they've recently legalized, and so there's going to be licensing rounds there. And the licensing rounds versus the hemp world is really, really interesting in the sense that if there's a molecule of THC in it, or 0.3% or greater, holy Christmas, the regulations that you're going to see outside of Oklahoma are obscene. However, if there's sufficiently low levels of THC prior to these USDA regulations going into effect last month, it was pretty freewheeling. And then, yes, they've changed the definition of hemp in 2014. They changed it in 2018. And now with Delta 8 and other derivatives, I'm pretty sure they're going to change it in 2022. So if you want to get in touch with us, go to cannabisindustrylawyer.com, Instagram, Cannabis Industry Lawyer. And then the podcast is Cannabis Legalization News. Yesterday, I did a quick one about the Detroit litigation that's just stopping the Detroit legacy application process that's there. And then I did a little bit on how to actually put together these applications. It's just very strange that you can become a hemp farmer with fairly minimal regulation. But then if you want to become a THC farmer, they ask for like an instruction manual about how your company is going to work that's maybe like 700 pages thick. Pretty cool.
Travis?
All right, Travis Chrisman here. I own Coastal Pay and Coastal Labs. Coastal Pay, we started in 2013. We do merchant services. We've got accounts like Ford and T-Mobile. We decided to pivot and get into CBD about 3 years ago. So, I've gone through, us as a processor have been shut down by banks as well. Probably the biggest one and known one is Elevon. We're currently registered with US Bank, and we have been for 5 years. And so we were kind of positioned well when, their credit policy allowed for CBD. So we got set up, got shut down, quite a few accounts. Clients are not happy. And so you're putting out fires. We had an exclusive deal with HSBC that kind of went south. 1 minute, someone in the bank is saying yes. Next minute, the underwriters are saying the risk is too high. So it's been challenging for us as a processor as well. Then there's Coastal Labs. For my love in the CBD space, got so excited, purchased a lab in Bend, Oregon. We do extraction manufacturing. We make stuff like CBD, CBC, CBN, crystal resistant distillate, and some of the raw ingredients. Then I also own a 800-acre USDA hemp farm. That's owned under a public entity called Green Hygienics. The ticker is GRYN. So yeah, pretty involved in the space, and I love doing these gigs.
Okay, let's roll into it. Coming into this industry in the very early years, everything was cash dominated, and that was my first experience. I saw 2 kilos of isolate go out the front door with a gentleman who walked in the front door with 2 what I call heavies, so bodyguards. Each one had a briefcase in each hand, took me to a back room, got out a money counter, and off we went. And I went, oh my God, where am I and what is going on here? We've come a long way from them. Can you expound on why, with specificity, we have these banking and merchant issues?
So I was in the industry in 2010, not really. I wrote a book in 2010 on the constitutionality of the federal laws. And then I had become a bank lawyer because law school is very expensive. And I paid off law school after I got into the actual industry. But my first clients for 8 years were financial institutions. And technically, prior to Donald Trump on December 22nd of 2018, signing the USDA Farm Bill for that, well, it's not the USDA, but the 2018 Farm Bill into effect, hemp was in this very strange world since 2014 through 2018, where it was still a controlled substance. And one of the reasons, and these guys will be able to explain it much, much better, that the merchant services processing would not work is because you can't, it would be like saying, I'm going to go buy this cocaine on my credit card. There's not a merchant code for cocaine. And so there's not a merchant code for cannabis. And then they were like, well, this isn't cannabis, this is hemp. I'm sorry, if you go to the Controlled Substances Act, it still is. And so that was the experimental 2014 to 2018 change that happened. And so my first clients, when I was explaining to them how to compliantly commit money laundering and other various racketeering and other various federal financial crimes, had to do with a 2014 FinCEN. FinCEN is a department in the Treasury. It stands for the Financial Enforcement Criminal Network. And so FinCEN created guidance and what they call marijuana czars. Now, that is not like the Russians or even like a boss. It has to do with suspicious activity reports. The most common suspicious activity reports is if, for example, after you bought that distillate, or after the distillate was bought and you gave the distillate and you took the briefcases full of money, you went and tried to deposit it, and it's over $10,000. They're gonna be like, thank you, Mr. Carruthers, and then they're gonna fill out a paper and they're gonna report that to this FinCEN network to be sure that you are not money laundering. And they have to report that over $10,000. Now, if you would have tried to break it up into like two $5,000s, that's called layering. You're not allowed to do that either. So as I'm explaining this to bankers who are very skeptical, by the way, about how they can compliantly commit money laundering and like racketeering and other various financial crimes related to the trafficking in a Schedule I substance called marijuana under federal law, they said, thanks. I invoiced them for my time, and that was my first cannabis client. But that's, in a nutshell, why, at least until December 22nd of 2018, it was exceedingly difficult to try to get into merchant processing for hemp.
Okay, Travis, Coastal obviously was developed and designed with a purpose to give us a solution to the problem, correct?
Yep.
Okay, so tell me about some of the pitfalls and what you experienced stepping in order to make this happen and where you sit now in terms of a solution.
Great question. So, you know, Bank of Albany was our first big player, and they were the first, actually, let's back up. T1 Payments out of Florida that was using an offshore bank in Netherlands was the first solution. The problem with using T1 is they use an offshore bank, so 50% of your transactions are going to show up as declined. We partnered with Bank of Albany, and they were the first domestic player. And, you know, my first question to them was, because of the size of our portfolio, is we had to be cautious about entering in the space. We had to make sure we were doing everything compliant because we could risk a pretty large portfolio. And, you know, I'll never forget the words that they said to us were Visa and MasterCard have deferred to the bank. And so the bank, Bank of Albany, their underwriters had to basically lay the groundwork and the compliance. And, you know, we got to give them some credit because they were the first ones in, right? And so their underwriters had to write a policy saying, okay, what are we accepting? What are we going to take? And what are we not going to take? And it's got to, you know, comply for as best as possible on a federal level. Accounts were, you know, getting approved pretty well in the beginning. One of the first issue we ran into was when you have one bank and you have a booming industry, bank got backlogged, and we were taking 3 months to approve accounts. And that's tough, right? If you're trying to start a business and you can't get, and you're the only, you know, bank or a credit card processor in the space, and it's taking 3 months to get approved, you can't do business. That was, you know, the first obstacle. Then after Bank of Albany entered for a good year and a half, then Elevon entered about December of 2019. They had a good 5-month run from about December to April. They were doing the complete opposite. They were approving accounts like within a day, right? And so it was free for all, wide open, not regulated. just way too open, right? And so dispensaries were going under there. Were getting approved that shouldn't be, because they were classifying themselves as a CBD shop. There was even mafia. The U.S. Bank actually ended up shutting down. The mafia from the Europe was running illegal transactions through Elevon. And so that freaked the bank out and they pulled the plug. And literally like within 30 days, everyone got shut down. So we took a step up, then a step down. And now we have I would say there's about 8 banks, acquiring banks in the US that are accepting. Axiom Bank is one, PBB&T is one. We personally, we use Bank of Albany and Avidia Bank. Those are 2 go-to. Fresno's doing it. Let's see, Esquire's doing it a little bit. And yeah, so there's about eight in total. There's probably 1 or 2 I'm missing. And then out of the acquiring banks, you've got credit card processors and ISOs under them that are selling their services. There's a company here called Nuvo that are one of them. They've got access to a couple banks. And one of I would say our current challenge in the merchant services industry is when we were open, we could do ingestibles. And now, our bank got fined $800,000 from the FDA and Visa for allowing ingestibles. And so that's kind of put a halt on ingestibles. And then medical claims. I would say those are 2 things that, we can't have medical claims on the website unless you're doing clinical trials with our bank. And those are 2 obstacles that we're faced with currently.
Brian, you mentioned when you were introducing yourself and telling your story that you have gone through several processors along the way. Was there a consistent thread or problem that was flagged or called out in each one of those instances that could tie together for the purpose of shutting you down?
So when I originally got shut down, what flagged it is, especially I was using Square and I used PayPal. What flagged it is the size of the transaction. So if you decide to do any sizable amount and run a business, they're going to look at you a little bit differently. They want to find out what's going on. So once you get over, like say $20,000 a month, they're really going to start looking at you. So that was one consistent thing. I'd also add, for example, another one I used was I used PayPal, I used Square, I used QuickBooks processing as well. I'm not sure who their processor is or anything like that, but I used QuickBooks, and I learned very quickly the right way to do things and the wrong way to do things. And I don't suggest anybody to do this, but one thing I would do is instead of putting, for example, when I'm sending an invoice, I would say that this was reference invoice 12345, and that invoice 12345 would have the details of everything that they're getting. I wouldn't put details of the actual product itself. So one thing that flagged it was the size of the transactions, plus if I just put hemp or if I put CBD, it would flag it.
Tom, from your position, oftentimes we see banking institutions, and I will name some. Chase, this is just my experience, Bank of Gunnison out of Morrison, Colorado, B of A, where they initially approved us for merchant services and then pulled the plug on merchant services with less than 30 days notice. The consistent phone call that I get from my accounts or people seeking answers is, who the heck can I sue? They said it was okay. Where is the line legally for that? Is there recourse? Are you subject to the mercy of your merchant processor?
Okay, anybody out there thinking they're going to sue JP Morgan Chase, that's fine. That's fine. You can hire a guy like me, and I'd be like, look, that's going to be a $25,000 retainer, and you're probably going to lose this case, and it's going to take a few years. And they don't care because they're the largest financial institution in the world. They probably have a litigation budget in the billions. You're gonna get in a pissing match with them. And so the bank that I know that was pro-hemp a year ago, I'm not sure if they've changed their tune now because of CBD or Delta 8 regulations evolving. was Morton Community Bank. And so you'd have a little bit better chance of getting an account at one of those. And my law firm banks at JP Morgan Chase. And because my YouTube channel was growing and we're making good revenue, I'm like, all right, well, maybe I should build a YouTube studio. JP Morgan said that they aren't doing any commercial loans until they're done with PPP. Or at least they told me that. And if they then change their tune on that, that's fine. I'm sure there's something in the account holders agreement that says they're allowed to do that. And I know that if you have any lending type of relationship with them, they'll have what they call an integration clause in any of their loan document paper. And that means that there is no outside, whatever we said is not part of the deal. And that's one of their other outs that they have. If you want to try to sue them, great, go for it. It's going to be expensive and it'll probably also not necessarily be successful, but a lawyer will charge you for it. And so you just have to be really, really careful. I mean, they've discussed about the difficulties they've had, but then also with the FDA and how they look at CBD. I mean, I understand why they're having all these difficulties because it is this area that is not perfectly clear. And then the FDA regulations I still don't think we don't have those, right? Yeah, okay. And so, I mean, it's the federal government moves really, really slowly, but this industry has been growing really quickly. And now with Delta 8, it's growing really, really quickly. And then with the vape mail ban coming, I'm not sure if that's going to cause additional consternation with people that are trying to have an online retail business, especially if you try to sell any type of vape product. And so these are the hurdles, these are the challenges, and hopefully you can find a bank through one of their contacts that will accept your business.
If you're not sure what the vape situation is, it's called the PACT Act. It prohibits USPS, and we have had some ancillary shipping companies like FedEx and DHL jump on board. You can no longer ship any part or particle of that vape system. That includes the batteries or the tanks through those systems. It's an effort to kind of cut off the vaping industry at its core. Travis, Coastal offered merchant services, and then you went into labs. So I'm going to go on the presumption that you are a solutions-based guy. Explain, I think I have an idea, why you went into labs on the heels of merchant services.
Yeah, I took a year off from Coastal Pay. We had a good 3-4 year run when we started. We went hard, didn't travel much, didn't vacate much, and kind of needed a year off. So I was able to kind of think, and we had a lot of vape clients, and our vape clients were starting to sell CBD. And our only solution at that time was a bank in Mexico. It was $1,500 a month, and 50% of their transactions were getting declined. And it was, our clients just were not happy with that solution. And so, I was kind of like, okay, how do I solve a problem for one of our clients? At that time, we had found Bank of Albany, and next thing you know, we're offering merchant services to CBD companies, 3 years ago, basically from right now. And, we signed Select CBD, we signed Ignite by Dan Bazarian, and I could name accounts for days that are products of ours. And so we signed these accounts, they're processing, and then come March 2018, 17 or 18, right before harvest. I'll never forget, one of our big accounts stopped processing. And, first I was like, okay, well, why did they stop processing? And they couldn't go into a competitor because there were no other competitors. And I reached out to the agent that brought in the account, and he said they ran out of product. I was like, what do you mean you ran out of product? Like, what industry do they run out of product? They're like, they need CBD isolate. I was like, okay, that's fine. I'm like, let me, I've got a pretty good network, got resources. Let me go experience. So I went and toured a few labs, and one thing led to the next. We invested in a lab in Oregon, and now we own a lab.
Brian, do the products that you carry and the products that you advertise, any ancillary piece of that moving part affect your merchant processing, or has it affected your merchant processing in the past?
So when it comes to processing, Like one you mentioned consumables, flour. They're in different categories when it comes to the processor. And then how you're doing business. Like for example, I have a retail store, but I also have an online store. I when working with the credit card processor, they ask specific questions, and they're like, "Okay, what are you selling, and where are you selling it?" So I have a brick and mortar. So then I also have online. So I had to get actually 2 separate processors for each one. And I had another separate one for my consulting. So if I was producing products, it was one. If I was selling products brick and mortar, it was another. If I was selling, like for example, on my website, HempSpot USA, I don't have hemp flour on there because that would have created another challenge. I'm not sure if all of them are like that. I just know that depending on the one you're working with, they could pose a challenge by having flour, especially if you have like Delta 8 consumables. So but that's my experience.
Okay. So this kind of takes me into another thought process. And as I said, we're kind of winging it today, which is great because it's a great conversation. In this whole Delta 8 model, Delta 8 is kind of the unknown, and it's an ongoing debate in the industry. I happen to be on the side of caution and probably don't want to step into that arena right now. But with that being said, there are countless products in the market. Okay, I went to Ulta, and now I can get masks for my hair with CBD in it, and I'm on the fence about that. Or I can go to TJ Maxx and find a pillow that's loaded full of CBD. Some of these products are kind of nuts. Done for purpose of marketing. States each have their own regulations now, and it's states' rights over federal regulation. Never forget that the state prevails, no matter where you are or where you are selling in that state. Some states are no inhalation, so that means you can't smoke it, you can't inhale it in any way. Other states, for the most part, I think with the exception of Texas and Florida, I could be mistaken, you can pretty much do anything with it that you want to, which is strange because Texas was the first state that did the raids and was totally against all of this. With that being said, and ramping up with Delta 8, now we're seeing and hearing, because I got a request this morning for Delta 10, Delta 11, each one of these molecules, as we begin to pull them out, do you feel from your perspectives that we're living in a world of give them an inch and they're going to take a mile, and they threaten the industry in terms of how we process money and or merchant services? It's kind of an open question.
Well, I'm assuming everybody knows about Delta 8, and that might be a faulty assumption. But the industry had a price curve that went down to the right for the price of isolate. So the story of the isolate from when she first got in the industry was probably for like 7 years ago or so, when the price was really, really high. It's crashed. You can buy a liter of high quality CBD distillate for hundreds of dollars now, not thousands. So by doing this isomerization process, and I'm not a chemist, I don't know how to do it, they can magically turn a $500 liter into a $1,500 liter that people want to buy because it gives them a feeling that they can actually appreciate, as opposed to a more subtle feeling like CBD, which unless you're like having an anxiety attack, you may not necessarily feel. For whatever reason, politicians do not like you to feel good when it comes to the cannabis plant. And Alabama is a good example. We had Alabama on our show on Wednesday, and yes, they actually do have hemp farmers down there. I was shocked. They do not have medical cannabis yet because the wealthy 4 people that want it have not yet purchased enough $1,000 plate dinners at various political functions yet, but they're working on it. And so you're going to have state after state. It's not just Alabama. I think Oregon is starting to move against Delta 8. And that's one of the reasons why I think eventually what you're going to get is a different definition of hemp come the 2022 Farm Bill. They come out about every 4 years, exactly. That addresses this and fixes it simply because now you have this hodgepodge thing that's going on again. And then when a state like Alabama passes a law to Schedule 1, and by Schedule 1 I mean the Controlled Substances Act, so a lot of times what happens is that the federal government will set the policy, and then the state will look to the federal government and very often model stuff. And so right now the USDA hemp rules are a good example of that. Some states would have to get their hemp programs approved through the USDA, and some of them had already done that. Some of the other ones haven't done it yet, but now the 2018 Farm Bill's final hemp rules are now in effect, and so they really need to get with the times on that. And so like if Alabama bans Delta-8 hemp, a lawyer like me is going to sue on behalf of the hemp industry and say, no, that is an unconstitutional criminal violation at the Alabama state level because it's trumped by the federal 2018 Farm Bill that defined hemp in an exceedingly broad fashion, so much so they even excised the word industrial. It's no longer industrial hemp, it's just hemp. And then they added a list of all these things that are everything essentially besides Delta-9 THC and a threshold level. And so you can create hemp, which is magically Delta-8 or magically Delta-10, but it's still considered hemp because of a definitional that probably was not the intention of Congress at all. And so Congress will fix it, but until that time, it will be getting more and more difficult for you to be able to operate, especially online, especially if you're going to be selling like Delta-8 edibles.
Okay. I just got the 5 warning. So we're going to open it up to a couple of questions, and then I'll suggest that you find these esteemed gentlemen out on the halls and ask them your questions and trade up cards. Are there any questions now? Okay. That closes this panel. We hope you're having a great time here at CBD Expo. If you need any more information, please come find us.